The H.W. Johns-Manville Company of New York announced in 1911 plans to build a large asbestos manufacturing plant at a cost of $1 million on 300 acres it purchased west of the Millstone River, and to plan to employ as many as 2,000 people, many local hard-working men and women.
Most of these people, all newcomers, did not speak English. Many were immigrants that arrived through Ellis Island and found their way into cities and coal mine areas in search of a new life. There were Poles, Russians, Hungarians, Slavs, Czechs, Lithuanians, Italians, and Germans. Records show that there were at least 20 languages spoken in what was then nothing more than a hamlet without a name. Soon, however, it would have one. Manville got its name, as history reveals, from the Central Railroad of New Jersey. Because of many shipments consigned to Johns-Manville, New Jersey, the railroad people just referred to it as Manville, and it caught on. The largest realtor at the time was Brooks & Brooks from New York City. They had purchased land on both sides of the Lehigh Valley Railroad. They conducted weekend excursions trains to Manville, as far west as Pennsylvania, areas such as Wilkes-Barre, Mount Carmel, and Shamokin. For these people, this was their opportunity to leave the dangerous coal mines for a more refreshing country living. Upon their arrival, they were quartered in farmhouses on company-owned land, but as their numbers increased, it was necessary to have them billeted as far away as Baumbrook in Somerville, with JM running special trains to bring them to work. Hotels and boarding houses did a thriving business and were always crowded. So much so that in 1917, Johns-Manville built its own 70-room hotel called the Asbestos Hotel to house its personnel. It was an elegant structure with a veranda, ballroom, dining room, bowling alleys, and a pool room. The structure later became the Johns-Manville administrative offices and still stands today, although vacant. These immigrants, however, were not overly impressed, since their dream was to own their own land and a home. These began to spring up across from the sprawling plant. An agreement to construct a home with a builder in those days was often consummated with an interpreter and a handshake, with contracts drawn in pencil with sketches of a floor plan. None of these homes had plumbing or electricity. They gladly put up with such inconveniences and hardships just to own their own home and have a job with JM. At that time, JM was hiring throughout the World War I and the post-war years, paying 12 cents an hour for 12 to 14-hour days and 6 days per week.
All right, the first time I come over here from Pennsylvania, I got a job at Johns-Manville. At that time, Johns-Manville, they employed quite a bit of Jamaicans. They had what they called a project here in Manville where they housed them. And these people were living right here. They didn't have very far to travel. In fact, they had to walk back and forth to work. It was closed for them, so they had them here for labor. Then later on, as the people start migrating from Pennsylvania, why, little bit by little bit, they were all eliminated. And after they had enough workers from Pennsylvania that come down here and other states, surrounding states that supplied the labor for Johns-Manville, why, most of them Jamaicans were all gone. Then he eventually tore down that project, which is today you can't even see any signs of it. Most of it is buried up here in the street where I built. When they knocked it down, they dumped all that garbage under my street. And this is where I established myself, and it was my American dream. I was tired of looking for work. I was pretty well assured that my work was going to continue here as long as I felt like working, in which I stood here for 32 and a half years, and I think that was my American dream. And like I say, they gave me a good living. I can't complain about it. I never had to beg for nothing. I made enough money to support me and my family and my son. And even though we found out later in the years about the trouble with asbestos, but so far, like I say, I'm in good health, pretty good health yet, and I'm 71 years old today, and I hope I'll be around here for quite a while yet.
I came into the town of Manville in 1956. Coming out of Richmond, Virginia, I was working down there. The town of Manville, I thought it was very nice. I went to work into JM for a couple of years. You're on a low man on the totem pole, and every once in a while you got laid off and they called you back. I started out in floor tile. Then I went into as a mailman. Town grew pretty much so. As far as Manville was concerned, I think it was a nice, clean town. People were very friendly. And as I went into the post office over there, of course, you got to meet a lot of people. And they were all friendly. Most of them were workers, you know, two families, both of them working. The majority of them worked in JM or American Cyanomen.
My first job was in H building. I used to shovel scrap down a hole into a grinder. From there, I went to A building. That was another bad place, but it was a job. And from
How
there...
can he say that? I worked there 35 years. I worked in Johns-Manville. I spun asbestos yarn.
I used to put it in the bins, and they would spin it after we put it into the bins. When I used to work in the card room, it used to get blowed in from the bins, and we used to have to pick it up by hand and put it to the carding machines. The carding machines made spools, and they made the finished product.
That's where I met him, 1941. We got married a year later. He was working in a card room, and my sister and I used to walk through, and he used to whistle at me, sort of, you know. And we got to know each other.